Welcome to the drawing lessons offered by Portola Library. This session is about landscape preparation and drawing rocks and mountains. But first I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk about one thing that is important for drawing vases and objects in still life drawings. Okay, when you're drawing a vase that's complicated like this, or even a simple one, you want to make sure that both sides are exactly the same. If one side is a little bit off, a little askew, it's not going to look good. So what you can do is draw one half of it by using your pencil held out, like I explained in the previous video, called sighting. So you sight the shapes and the height and the width, measure across so you get that correct. And then you want to make sure you measure where the halfway mark is. So then you draw a line all the way through, measure the halfway at the bottom and the top, draw a line all the way through. Then you take tracing paper and you trace, like I already did, you trace that half, including the line in the middle. And then you're going to flip it over and line up that line in the middle. Tape your tracing paper in place, and then now that you have your stencil, your tracing paper secured, I had to redo it with some new tape because the other tape wasn't working. But anyway, so you take a piece of paper and you use a nice dark pencil and you make like a carbon paper with it. And you don't want to use real carbon paper because it's kind of a blue, bluish black, but I don't know how that would work with pencil, and it's a pencil drawing, so you want to use pencil to keep with your pencil drawing. So then you flip it over and you slide it in place, and then you take a pencil and you draw over the lines. You want to do it kind of dark, so that it shows up. Because this shape here is hard to get exact for both sides so that it lines up. And by using this, then you get a more accurate. And if I had this on a flat table, it would be a lot easier for me to be pressing hard. Right now, with it on the easel, it's a little hard. So then you see you've got both sides. This side's going to be lighter because you just transferred it, but then you can go back over and darken your lines, and then both sides are going to be matching. So that's a little trick. You can use it for cups, you can use it for vases, you can use it for bowls. Bowls are real hard to get both sides exactly the same. So then you can also use this carbon-like graphite paper. Say you did a whole sketch on a piece of paper, but you don't want to redraw it on your bigger piece of paper. You want to just transfer it. You could transfer your whole drawing by using this. So that's kind of a nice little handy tool. Okay, in the past I talked a little bit about negative spaces, and you still need more practice and learning to see, and that's what the whole course is based on, is perception. So what I want you to do is, I'm going to send this to you. What I want you to do is you will draw the whole outside shapes of this stool. You will not draw into the parts of the stool at all. You'll just draw, basically is what it is you're drawing the background. So if this was sky, you would draw all the sky. If this was a wall, then you would draw all the parts of the wall. And then when you're all done, the stool appears. Then I want you to take a chair, and you're going to do the same thing, but not from a photograph. You're just going to draw a real chair. And the interesting thing about drawing the negative spaces, it helps you to see that all 4 legs do not come to the very bottom all lined up. We know that all the legs of a stool and all the legs of a chair are the same length. And so when we draw them, our mind is saying we have to have this leg come way down here and this one come way down here. But no, because it's in perspective, just like a building. It goes off to a vanishing point. And so when you draw the chair, the seat of the chair will be a lot easier to draw when you draw the negative spaces around it. So I want you to do this assignment, and then I want you to do a chair that you have in your house, let's say a wooden chair, not an upholstered chair, but a wooden chair. Okay, when you start to draw landscapes, it's a good idea to get an idea how to draw rocks, mountains, trees, rivers, and winding roads, because those make a landscape look a lot more interesting. And so as you can see in my river painting here, I have some rocks, and most of the rocks have a lot of different planes where the light is showing on one side and then casting shadows on the other sides. And so what you could do is you could go get some real rocks in the neighborhood, in your yard, or at the river, and then try to get some that have interesting planes, so that when, right now there's a light source from this side, casting shadows here, and casting shadows here, and on this side, and you can see more light on these sides of the rocks, just like here. So what you want to do is you're going to be drawing each one of these rocks. I'm going to be sending this to you in an email, and instead of just leaving these planes completely white, because most rocks don't have a whole white side. So what you would do is you're going to draw a little bit of shading on the light sides, but very lightly. So for example, here is this rock here, kind of outlined, and I will show you a little bit how to shade it. So you have dark here, and you can use hatching lines. You can use cross-hatching lines. You can cross in several different directions to make it a lot darker. And then for the lighter areas, you can either use a very dark pencil or go to a lighter pencil and use hatching lines and cross-hatching lines that are a lot lighter. And I'm doing this very quickly. If you're a little bit more careful, take a little more time, then you're not going to have white spaces in between your crosshatch. So this has a little bit less. It's getting a little bit of reflected light. So it's a little bit lighter tones, value. And then over here again, it's a lot darker. So you notice I originally drew the whole basic shape of the rock first. So that's how you will do it. And it'll be good practice to get several different rock shapes that you can keep as a reference, so that when you're doing a landscape, instead of doing a rock that looks like a potato, you'll have rocks that have more interesting shapes. Remember to draw a line down the middle of your rock. If you look at each one of these, you draw a line down the middle. Each side is different on each one of the rocks. And that's what you, and same when you're trying to find some rocks. Try to find some that don't look like potatoes, because then it won't be quite as interesting. Okay, now here's an example of a photograph of some really nice shaped rocks. You can see a strong light source from here, and the planes in shadow of the rocks, and then the real dark areas in between the rocks where it's shaded. Makes for a very interesting composition just with rocks. And this is all negative space I didn't like that rock there, so I took it out. So I drew part of this to give you an idea how you can go very tiny details in drawing rocks. You can either draw them the way the other ones were with real rough hatch marks, or you can go and draw real tiny little marks. And that's how I did all of this. It's very time consuming, but it is very rewarding. Like right here, there is a slightly darker spot, and so I would use little teeny marks and keep going over them and over them until I get the shape that I like. And so that's how all of this was done. Here, this was a lot of cross-hatching back and forth to get it dark. You don't want to go too dark in the darks, because then your paper turns shiny. You don't want to keep going over and over and over, because then your paper gets wrinkly and it gets shiny, and you don't want to blend it too much when you want the real dark darks, because that'll also make it too shiny. But see here, so there's a contrast between the very loose cross-hatching or very tiny little marks that you build up by going over and over and over it again, and then you can get a little bit more realistic looking rocks. So there's a couple different ways that you can go. When you draw landscapes, you most likely would want to add some mountains in the background. And so notice here, if you draw a line down the middle, and I consider the peak is kind of like the place to draw a line through, both sides are different. And that makes for a more interesting mountain. You don't want to have triangular shaped mountains. Also, notice that all of this area is not white paper, but you can see there's ravines that come down, and there's shading with crosshatch. This one actually has some curved contour lines in the crosshatch and a little blending as well. Notice also that this part and this part here, this whole side of the mountain and this whole side is in shadow because the light source is coming from here. But even though the light source is coming from here and this is in shadow, the high parts of the ridges are a little bit lighter than the deep ravines. And that's interesting too, because many times people will draw a mountain and they'll just draw a little bit of shading right here and they'll leave all that white. But actually that part should be shaded as well. And you want to have a wide range of values. We talked about using the value scale. It wouldn't hurt to draw 10 squares from black and lighter gray all the way through to white and keep that as a reference, or print this out so that you get an idea that you don't want to have just all light shading and you don't want to have all very dark shading, but you want to have a wide range of values just like in the value scale. And here's another example. Again, you draw a line down the middle and both sides. This one is a little similar on both sides, so maybe this could have been cut out a little bit more here. The same here. This is almost the same on both sides, but not quite. But again, the light source is coming from here, and you can see the shading in the different ravines. So there's 4 assignments to do in practice in preparation for doing a final landscape drawing. You're going to be drawing these rocks with more shading than is what is here. Plus you're going to add your own rock. You're going to be drawing some mountains. You can look at mountains in the area, or you can draw these mountains. You're also going to get more practice in learning to see by drawing the negative spaces of the stool, which I will send you, and also the negative spaces of a chair, not an upholstered chair, but say a wooden chair that you have in your home. So 4 homework assignments to do in the next week. So thank you very much for attending and watching these videos, and hopefully that you're making some progress in your drawings. Thank you very much.